Okay, let's jump back to 2002, and stealth games back then were mostly focused on line of sight and basic patrol routes. But then, Ubisoft dropped the very first Splinter Cell and it completely changed the industry. They released it on pretty much everything: PC, PS2, the original Xbox, the GameCube, and even the Game Boy Advance. You play as Sam Fisher, a highly trained Black Ops operative who is pulled out of retirement to work for a new, super clandestine branch of the NSA known as Third Echelon. The story is classic Tom Clancy geopolitical thriller stuff. You're basically sent to investigate a crisis originating in Georgia, the country which is being orchestrated by a rogue president. The narrative is very grounded, very serious, and relies heavily on the incredible voice acting of Michael Ironside as Sam Fisher. His dry, cynical banter with his handler Lambert is honestly one of the best parts of the game. But what actually made this game so special? Well, it was the lighting. The developers heavily modified Unreal Engine 2 to create a dynamic lighting and shadow system that wasn't just there to look pretty, it was an actual core gameplay mechanic. There's this light meter on your HUD, and if you're standing directly under a street lamp, the meter goes up and enemies will spot you instantly. But if you're crouched in a pitch black corner, the meter drops and you're basically invisible. It sounds incredibly simple today, but back then it was actually mind-blowing. You had to actively manipulate your environment to survive, like pulling out your silenced pistol to shoot bulbs, disable generators, and quietly sneak up behind guards to interrogate them in the dark. It also introduced that iconic split jump where Sam jumps up a narrow hallway and does a full split between the two walls to hide above an enemy's head. It was incredibly cool, even if it was a bit situational. Now let's talk about some negatives, because if you're someone with very little time, this game can get a bit on your nerves. The gameplay is actually pretty rigid, like the stealth is kinda unforgiving. Many of the early missions have instant fail states if you trigger an alarm a few times or sometimes even just once. It relies heavily on trial and error. You'll walk into a room, fail to spot a camera hiding in the shadows, trigger the alarm, and have to reload your save. The AI is also a bit know-it-all at times, spotting you through tiny cracks or instantly knowing exactly where you are if you make the slightest noise. The main story will probably take you about 12.5 hours, while trying to be a completionist will push you to around 16 hours, which is decent. But the biggest hurdle for PC gamers today is actually just getting the game to run. If you try to boot it up on Windows 11, you're gonna be miserable. It doesn't natively support 16:9 aspect ratio, and worse, modern graphics cards can't properly render the game because it's so old. So, like, the shadows and lights are not displayed correctly on modern hardware. And to fix this, you gotta dig into community patches. You need a wrapper called DG Voodoo 2, which translates old DirectX 8 into modern ones, alongside the 13AG widescreen fix to fix that aspect ratio. But thankfully there's an amazing mod called Enhanced SC, which is basically an all-in-one fix. So, is the original Splinter Cell worth playing today if you have limited time? Honestly, I have to say no. While it kinda laid the foundation of the stealth genre, the trial and error gameplay combined with the massive headache of patching the PC version makes it a tough recommendation for someone who just wants to jump in and play for an hour. If you're a hardcore enthusiast, absolutely take the time to set it up. But if you're short on time, you're better off watching a story recap on YouTube and moving on to the later games.
Wilkes, you okay?
I think so. Hopefully everybody's all right.
Next up is the sequel Pandora Tomorrow, which came out in 2004 on PC, PS2, Xbox, and GameCube. Sam is now deployed to Indonesia to deal with a militia leader named Suhadi Sadono. He has basically taken the US hostage with a biological weapon threat. But if he's captured or killed, the virus gets released. It's a fantastic tense setup that really pushes Sam to his limits. Gameplay-wise, it's pretty much just a numbered sequel. It didn't reinvent the wheel or anything, but it did add some really nice quality of life stuff. The biggest change, I believe, was the level design. While the first game was mostly industrial complexes and CIA headquarters, Pandora Tomorrow threw you into much bigger environments. It was a huge step up visually. It also introduced the Spies vs. Mercs multiplayer mode. Apparently it was incredibly innovative and people still talk about it today. But I don't really know much about it because I never played it. From a time perspective, Pandora Tomorrow is slightly more forgiving than the first game. The main story averages out at about 10.5 hours, and a full completionist run takes roughly 15 hours. So it's totally manageable that way. But guys, if you thought the first game was hard to run on a modern PC, Pandora Tomorrow is an absolute disaster. I would say it's the most broken PC port in the entire franchise. In fact, it's so broken that Ubisoft actually delisted the game. You couldn't buy it on Steam for a long time, but they recently re-released it in 2025. It's a lot better, still buggy in some areas, but things like the shadows are fixed. So, is it worth your time? The game itself is great, it's just as good, if not slightly better than the original. And with its re-release, I would say give this one a go, especially if you skip the first one, because it has a similar vibe gameplay-wise. Okay, now it's time to talk about the crown jewel of the franchise, and I say this because not only was this my first Splinter Cell game that I played, but it's also widely considered not just the best game in the series, but quite literally one of the greatest stealth games ever made. Ubisoft Montreal took on development for this one, and they absolutely knocked it out of the park. The story takes us to geopolitical tensions in East Asia and the devastating use of weaponized algorithms known as masse kernels. The banter between Sam and Lambert here is at its absolute peak. It's dark, cynical, and genuinely hilarious at times. What makes Chaos Theory so incredibly monumental is how they abandoned the rigid, linear, trial and error level design of the first two games. Instead, it presents you with massive sandbox environments with multiple infiltration routes. A perfect example of this is that bank mission, where you're given total freedom on how you want to approach the objective. Do you want to sneak in through the roof, or maybe you hack the security systems and stroll through the front door? The choice is entirely yours, and it respects player agency in a way the previous games just didn't and quite frankly couldn't. Gameplay-wise, they added a ton of new features. This time there's also a sound meter, which means you gotta actively monitor your footsteps when enemies are nearby. But if there's a thunderstorm outside or a loud generator running, you can move faster and take down guards without being heard. They also finally gave Sam a combat knife, and this was much needed because it allowed for lethal takedowns. And those instant fail states were completely abolished. If you mess up and trigger an alarm, the mission doesn't end. Instead, the enemies react, setting up barricades and patrolling in tighter formations. It forces you to adapt to your mistakes rather than punishing you with a loading screen. And because the levels are so much larger and more open-ended, the playtime is a bit longer. A standard playthrough focused on the main objectives will take you around 13 hours, while a completionist run trying to do every level perfectly can take up to 22 hours or so. Now what about PC compatibility? Well, finally some good news here too. Chaos Theory has aged relatively better than the first two games. It usually works pretty well right out of the box, assuming you have the latest game version. The only minor issues are widescreen support and modern controllers. But you can fix both of these issues with some mods. So, is Chaos Theory worth your precious time? Yes, 1,000 times yes. If you only ever play one Splinter Cell game in your entire life, make it this one. The gameplay is smooth, the sandbox levels are incredibly rewarding, and the PC version takes maybe 5 minutes of tweaking to run perfectly on a modern system.
How displaces evolved.
I won't talk.
You're gonna make me cut your throat and look for the words inside your neck.
Oh, God. Please.
Okay, take a deep breath because things are about to get a bit messy. In 2006, we were in the middle of a massive generational hardware transition, moving away from the standard definition era of the PS2 and original Xbox into the HD era of the PS3 and 360. So they wanted this new Splinter Cell double agent on literally every console imaginable to maximize profits. But instead of just porting one game, they made an absolutely baffling decision to make two completely different versions of the game, built on different engines and by different studios. It wasn't just graphical differences, but entirely different level designs, different characters, and different mechanics. The core narrative premise is the same across both versions. Sam is dealing with the tragic death of his daughter, and he goes deep undercover to infiltrate a terrorist organization called the JBA. An interesting addition here is a trust meter. Now you gotta balance your loyalty between the NSA and the bad guys. Like if you help the bad guys blow something up, your NSA handlers get mad. It's a pretty cool concept that adds a lot of moral ambiguity. Okay, so let's break down the two versions and let's just call them version 1 and version 2. Version 1 was developed by Ubisoft Shanghai for the PC, 360 and PS3. This is the canon version, the actual mainline game in the series, and a true next-gen version. It pushed graphical fidelity with incredible lighting and water effects, but it drastically changed the stealth mechanics. They got rid of the light and sound meters, replacing them with a very simple looking system on Sam's back. The level design also changed heavily, featuring a lot of broad daylight missions, like the infamous Kinshasa level, where you're literally sneaking around in the blazing African sun. Furthermore, the JBA missions in version 1 are structured as timed, non-linear sections, where you have like 20 minutes to run around the base, scanning fingerprints and planting bugs before a timer runs out. Version 2, on the other hand, was developed by Ubisoft Montreal for the original Xbox, PS2, and the Nintendo Wii. And because they were building for older hardware, they literally just reused the Chaos Theory engine, which means it plays exactly like Chaos Theory. A lot of people absolutely love version 2, often calling it Chaos Theory 1.5. The levels are fundamentally different, like the JBA missions here play out like standard linear stealth missions instead of timed events. The trust mechanic, I believe, is handled way better in this one, using a single fluid meter instead of two confusing opposing meters in version 1. So, how long is it and is it worth playing? Well, the game takes roughly 11 to 13 hours to complete. But listen, if you decide to play it, just stay far away from the PC version. It will waste your time, crash constantly, and ruin the experience. You really only have two options. You can either play version 1 on an Xbox using backward compatibility, which is a lot better, or you can download an emulator on your PC and emulate version 2. But is it worth all this trouble? Probably not, at least not for me. So, after the massive headache of Double Agent, they took a 4-year break. And when it finally returned in 2010 with Conviction, it was kind of a big departure from the slow, methodical stealth roots of the series. Sam is no longer working for the government. He's rogue, grumpy, and on a personal vendetta to find out the truth about his daughter's death. And because of this, the gameplay was completely overhauled to match his aggression. They took away the light meter, the sound meter, and even the ability to drag bodies. Instead, the stealth system was simplified massively. Now, when you're hiding in the shadows, the game goes black and white. And when you step back into the light, the color returns. It looks cool, yes, but it's very binary. The most controversial addition, however, was the mark and execute system. If you take down enemies with hand-to-hand combat, you earn execution tokens. To use them, you just peek out from cover, mark 3 or 4 enemies, push a button, and watch as Sam automatically headshots every single one of them in a cinematic slow-mo sequence. Many stealth fans absolutely hated this. Also, you couldn't go through levels completely non-lethally. The game kind of forces you into massive firefights, particularly in the later levels. However, while the main campaign caught a lot of flack, almost everyone agrees that the co-op and the deniable ops challenge modes were fantastic and provided a ton of replay value. So, is Conviction worth playing if you have limited time? Honestly, yes, it absolutely is. Look, it's not a traditional Splinter Cell game. If you go in expecting another Chaos Theory, you're gonna be disappointed. But if you treat it like a third-person action stealth shooter, then it's pretty fun. And the fact that the campaign is only about 6 hours long, you can easily knock this game out in a single weekend.
One shot, one kill.
So after Conviction, they created a brand new studio, Ubisoft Toronto, and tasked them with creating the new Splinter Cell game that would somehow please both the hardcore stealth fans and the newer fast-paced action fans, and the result was Blacklist, which released in 2013 for the PC, PS3, and 360. The story kicks off with an attack on a US Air Force base by a group calling themselves the Engineers. They issue an ultimatum called the Blacklist, promising further attacks unless American troops withdraw from foreign deployments. To combat this, the president creates 4th Echelon and gives Sam a cargo plane called the Paladin, which serves as your mobile command center. It also introduced this new system in the game, where at the end of every mission, you're graded and rewarded with currency based on how you played. The Ghost playstyle rewards you for strict non-lethal stealth and avoiding enemies. The Panther playstyle rewards you for lethal but silent stealth from the shadows. And the Assault playstyle rewards you for going in loud with assault rifles and explosives. The level design is phenomenal too, reminiscent of Chaos Theory. Levels like the Abandoned Mill and American Consumption are huge sandboxes with dozens of infiltration routes, ventilation shafts, and vertical climbing paths. However, there was this one thing which the community was kinda mad about, which is they decided to recast Sam Fisher. While the new guy did a fine job, it just didn't sound like him. He's lost all of his sarcastic gravitas and just felt like a generic angry military guy. But other than that, the game is packed with content. It will take you like 10 plus hours to beat the main story, but if you dive into those extensive side missions, you can easily spend 28 plus hours. So, is Blacklist worth your time? Definitely. In my opinion as a PC player, this is the most mechanically sound, fluid and enjoyable game in the entire series from a pure gameplay perspective. It respects your time by letting you play exactly how you want to. So there you have it. Every single mainline Splinter Cell game explained from top to bottom. Let me know down in the comments which one is your personal favorite, and I'll see you guys in the next video.
I'm at Camp X-Ray.
Good. Cut across. You'll be able to reach the shoreline and rendezvous with Briggs.